Alright YouTube, today we're going to be talking about a snake draft versus an auction draft, and then what I consider to be the hybrid draft, which is something that I came up with last year that we implemented in my league. So first I want to start talking about the pros and cons of a snake draft. So most of you guys are probably doing a snake draft, or that's what they're used to. That's when you draft, you take a hat and you pull numbers out 1 through 10. Let's say you have 10 in your league, 1 through 10. Whoever picks one gets to draft first, and it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Back down to 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. In the second round would be 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then it would start over in the third and fourth round. So the pros to a snake draft, definitely it is an easy draft to do. All you got to do is put your names in the hat. And pull out the draft order, and then you go in that order and then reverse that order, and so on and so on, so forth. The second pro to a snake draft is that it is very quick to do. It's fast. You can probably draft 16 rounds with 10 guys in the league, and in a matter of a couple hours or less. This is typically how you're going to do it online. The cons of the snake draft, it is basically unfair, and you're putting your fate of your team in the hands of a drawing out of a hat for what your draft order is going to be. And that's just too much chance involved right there for most people who are serious about fantasy football. The other drawback is, the guy who drafts 10th in the first round is also picking first in the second round, and every other round you've got a guy that's drafting back-to-back, so he can kind of use that to his advantage. So next, let's talk about the auction draft. Okay, what are the pros? It's definitely the fairest way to draft. It's the fairest option out there for drafting. And second of all, no one is going to be at the drawing of or at the mercy of a drawing out of a hat, which no one wants to be. I mean, do you really want your fantasy season to be based on how you get pulled, how your name gets pulled out of a hat? I don't personally. It's definitely if you're in a big money league, that's you don't want to leave it to chance. So that's a good thing about an auction draft. The cons of an auction draft is obviously it takes a very long time. You're auctioning off every player. 160 players if it's a 10-team league can take, the shortest probably time is probably 4 hours, and it's going to be more like 6 hours. The second con of an auction draft is if you don't have like a semi-professional or professional auctioneer helping you out, it's going to be sucky and it's going to take longer. So definitely auction draft is much more fair than a snake draft, but it's going to take longer. Snake draft is faster, but not as fair. Let's talk about one more option. It's a little more fair than snake draft. It's not quite as long as the auction draft, which is what I call the weighted average snake. And the pros of the weighted average snake are more fair than a normal snake. It's easy and it's fast. So how does this work? It takes a weighted average of how important that first, second, third, fourth pick are in the draft, and it penalizes the players in the third round. So instead of having 1 through 10, 10 through 1, that's how the first round would go. But the third round would be more like, all right, we're going to give some love to 5, 6, and 7, and then the 1, 2, 3 guys are going to be pushed to the back of the third round. And the weighted average draft the only thing that's different about the weighted average draft is the third round changes slightly, and it affects the rest of the draft. In my league, we are do a hybrid auction draft, is what I'm going to coin that as, and it is unique to our league. I don't know if anyone else is doing it. But we do what is called the hybrid auction, and what it involves is 5 rounds of auction. So if we have 10 in our league, that's going to be 50 players that are auctioned off. After that, we go into a snake draft based on the money you have left from the auction. With the auction hybrid draft, and I'm going to go over some of the situations in our league, and I've got some paper or some notes here. This is the rules for our not our weighted auction draft, but our hybrid auction draft. What it basically involves is rounds 1 through 5. Each player will be given $500 in virtual money to spend on drafting 5 players. Okay. We'll utilize the ESPN Top 100 list, and that's the only people you can nominate is off that list. I don't know why anyone would even want to nominate anyone off of any other list for the first 5, but definitely the first 5 players are the most important that you're going to draft. The rest are kind of like sleeper picks and gravy from then on out. But the reason we do an auction for the first 5 rounds is because it is definitely the most important. So the way this works, we set up a draft order or a nomination order basically, so the first person can nominate a player, they set the minimum bid for that player, and then an auction for each of those players ensues. We typically bring in maybe not a professional auctioneer, but someone who definitely has skills auctioneer in being an auctioneer. And in Texas, those are not really that hard to find. It's kind of like a sport here. People like to do it. The minimum bid that you place when you nominate a player cannot be obviously more than you have in your bank account at that point. And you can nominate any of the players out of the top 100. Another rule we have is there's 90 seconds between auction players. So let's talk about what happens if let's say you spend $500 on your first 2 players. Okay, you run out of money before you've got 5. If that happens and no one else runs out of money before the 5, after the first 47 players are drafted, you'll get your choice of the first 3 at any point. So how do we move on to the 6th round? The 6th round, how do we decide the 6th round? From the 6th round to the 16th round in our hybrid auction is going to be a typical snake draft. And the way we determine the order for round 6, which will be reversed on 7, the same on 8, reversed on 9, etc., is based on how much money you have left at the end of the auction. So the person with the most money left at the end of the auction will draft first in the 6th round. They'll obviously draft last in the 7th round, and so on and so forth. If there is a tie for money, let's say 2 teams have, or 2 owners have $50 left at the end of the auction, then we will do basically a pop, rock, paper, scissors, or coin flip, whatever it is to break the tie. If there is a tie because multiple people are out of money, let's say 2 people have $0 at the end of the auction draft, what we will do is decide who ran out of money first, and they will pick behind the person who had money at the latest in the round. Last year I ran out of money. I spent $500 on 3 players in the auction draft. If I remember right, it was Antonio Brown. Who else did I get? I got a decent running back, and then I got Calvin Johnson. Okay, so I spent $500. There was another guy who spent all his money on 2 players. We were the only 2 that ran out of money, but there was obviously 5 players left out of the 50 that need to be drafted in the first 5 rounds. So we took turns drafting our final, and we got pretty much free reign of whatever we wanted based on what was left out of the top 100. So I would recommend you guys, if you can find an auctioneer and you got time, always do the auction draft. If you want to speed things up, try the auction hybrid. It's going to give all the weight on the auction to the first 5 rounds, which we all know are the most critical. Everything after that is gravy. It's going to speed things up, and I think you'll really find that if you bring in a great auctioneer, even if you have to pay them $50 or $100, it really livens up the draft. It makes it worth doing, and no one can claim that the draft was unfair this year, or they got screwed by the hat drawing, etc. So I'm going to show you some of those things when we have our draft party. I'll show you kind of how we auction. But tune in. Here in about a month, I'll have another video out of the draft party, and we'll go over a few things we talked about in the previous videos.